All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Valerie Friedlander, and I'm your host for Motherhood Unlimited, the #1 summit for moms who want it all. Welcome to our very first interview, and thank you so much for joining us. It is our mission to take the limits off motherhood and empower moms to have it all for their own unique and vibrant life. We believe that when moms learn to create where, who, and how they want to be, their happiness and overall life satisfaction increases, and they become inspired and inspirational for their children and each other. Today, we are talking about the positive power of raising and nurturing your babies and business at the same time. Our expert is Dana Malstaff. I invited her to share with you because of her message that it's possible to be passionate and successful in business and family. Yes, and family. Thank you so much for being here, Dana. It's so wonderful to have you.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So before we get started, let me tell you all a little bit about Dana. Dana is a mother, author, business and content strategist, coach, podcaster, and blind spot reducer. Oh, nice. Dana is the author of Boss Mom, the ultimate guide to raising a business and nurturing your family like a pro, and the founder of the Boss Mom movement. She serves boss moms who yearn for more time and less guilt when it comes to building their business and raising their family by providing the tools they need to get more out of their content and business without sacrificing their family goals. When she is not creating new courses or building new strategy tools for creative entrepreneurs, she can be found chasing her son on the beach, helping her daughter say her first words, or thinking of the next new fun family adventure. Awesome. I love that.
She is. She's totally saying the cutest things these days. I just taught her how to touch somebody's nose and say boop.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I've done that too. It's very fun. It's so funny. So let me ask you, let's start off with you telling us a little bit about how you take the limits off motherhood.
Yeah, so it's such an interesting concept because, I think I was just on an interview with somebody for the Boss Mom podcast, and she was telling a story about how she didn't want to be a parent originally. Her and her husband didn't want to do that. They love to travel. They love to be able to move and do whatever they want. And they got into a situation where they had a conversation with a friend who had lost a child and was now still wanting to try again. And they just realized this, power, that there must be this emotional power to being a parent. And so in my mind, I was going, well, I always knew I wanted to be a parent. I knew it. But when I became a parent, your whole world changes. And not just because you've got a baby that you're taking care of. The way you think changes. The way, I can't even watch half of the emotional commercials without crying now. You're wondering, oh my gosh, the things that I used to think it was fun to talk about what we do if there was a zombie apocalypse, and now I can't even wrap my head around it. I've got little tiny children. You're a different person. And so it's so interesting to talk about the, taking the limits off of being a parent, because I don't think when you go into parenthood, you think about those things. I think you think about gosh, am I going to get any sleep? How am I going to feed this baby? Your world is pretty small about what you're going to do. But after you get into parenthood, you start to get a hold of things. And then you start to see, it's almost like in a career, what's going to be my next level? What's going to be my next level? So for me, I actually had quit my job. And the day I quit my job, I got pregnant. Which I always joke when I tell this, my husband's like, it's way too much information. I'm like, well, we're all adults here. I got preggers.
Yeah.
And so basically started my business and my family at the same exact time. And for me, that was really scary because it was basically two things I'd never done before. I had no idea what I was doing. I wanted to be good at them, but didn't know what to expect. And so I basically spent the next 9 months trying to figure out how to do both. I had my son and realized I didn't want to be a stay-at-home mom, which comes with a lot of guilt because you think, wow, I should. And I don't have to go to a job every day. I own my own business, but I wanted him to take naps so I could work on my business. And I would try and like breastfeed him and work at the same time. And you get really good at the multitasking with the children.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I went through that process and was starting to build my business, still had a ton of guilt, basically got pregnant with my second daughter. And right when that started happening, my business was starting to really grow. And it dawned on me that I needed to stop figuring out, in order for me to be successful in business and life and happiness, I needed to figure out how to not feel guilty about being a parent. And we talk about limitations. And for me, that was my limitation, was I felt guilty that if I wasn't a parent 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, if I didn't love being a parent, didn't do that with all of my heart every single day, that I was a bad parent. And that was my limitation I'd put in and I felt massive guilt.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to recognize that actually I'm a much better parent for me personally. And I've found a lot of women in the community that agree. I'm a much better parent when I'm not a dedicated parent 24 hours a day. When I have time to cultivate the things. For me, it's business. For other women, it's other things. But for me, it was running my own business, having my hobbies, doing things that make me feel like an adult, like a human, like a woman. Outside of being a parent, I became a better parent. And my kids got to see me doing things that made me a better person outside of just caring about them, so that they see that there's a universe outside of themselves, which I think is important as well. All of that sort of accumulated as I was pregnant with my daughter to help me realize how to get rid of that guilt. And that getting rid of that guilt was recognizing that there is positive power, that there is actual goodness in showing my kids that work's not a negative word, in showing my kids that they are not the center of the universe, that they are part of the universe as a whole, and that other things happen, that we are all more dynamic than one thing. And that one thing isn't just my kids. There's so much else. I'm a wife. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm a business entrepreneur. I'm a support system for other women. And all of those things. I'm a sewer,
Yeah.
I'm a sci-fi lover. All of those things are important to show your kids that there's more. There's more than just one thing. There's more than just them, and there's more than just you. And after realizing that, that's what prompted the Boss Mom book. I wanted to share that with other women, because the more I went out into the community, the more I realized, which is part of you putting this, whole summit on, the more I realized, holy crap, people are feeling this all over the place, and we feel alone. We feel alienated. We feel scared to tell anybody. We feel, I mentioned to one of my mom's friends the other day, she asked about my son's birthday party. And I said, well, honestly, I'm not really a fan of other kids. Like, I love my son, but little tiny babies running around, I don't work like that. Like, I love children, but I don't necessarily want to throw a massive party with other kids. So until my son is like 5, it's just family birthday parties, and that's how we roll. And she was like, I cannot believe, that's so awesome that you say that without any guilt. And I live in a community where we all say that without any guilt. And, some people love to throw massive parties and some don't. We all have our things. But I knew that there had to be a place where people could feel, other women and moms could feel that they could be open about however they parent, about however they're doing what they're doing, about however they want to cultivate themselves outside of being a parent, and not feel guilty about it. And that's why we wrote the book, started the podcast, started the business, started the, community, because it's so important. Like, that support, just knowing you're not alone, to be open to be okay with saying the things that you like and don't like and need to do. As a parent, and as more than a parent, it's vital. And it's not just vital for us as parents, it's vital for our kids. Because if we're unstable, that is not a good environment for your kids. And pretending like being a parent all the time, every day, and only dedicating everything to them, and then feeling emotionally unfulfilled and empty because of it, doesn't help anybody. So that was a really long way of telling you.
That was an awesome way. I love it that way.
You get me on a rant and I just keep going. I can't help it.
That's what this is about. It is about all of those things that you said, and being more than just a mom. That mom encompasses, yes, it's now a part of who I am. I mean, it's like a defining part of who I am, but it's not all of me. My mom life is all my life, but I am more than just a mom. It's like, how those two things, I heard the question asked, once I become a mom, is it a hat I wear, or is it who I am, like adjusting to that concept. So,
well, you definitely, I think we all identify, like we connect as mothers because there are things once you've had a baby. And honestly, like even if you didn't birth your baby, you know, from adoption or foster or those kinds of things, being a parent has its inside jokes. It has its challenges. It has its things that make you cry, like in the bathroom floor, you know, those kinds of things that we commiserate with, we connect with, we laugh about, we cry about. So I do think there's an absolute identifier with being a mother, and then outside of that, being a parent, and that, you know, all of those things. Just like we watched the same cartoons when we were kids, and people that are 10 years younger than us aren't going to get our jokes. It's that same thing. There's just a circle of connection that we have. But I do think it's so interesting because I think there's a limitation of how we think about motherhood. And we think about motherhood being, I have a child, and so being a mother means I tend to my child. But when you send them to school, they learn about science and reading and all those things. And so to me, I've started to learn that, oh my gosh, I need to read. Like I wasn't reading in front of my kids because to me it was like, well, shoot, they're going to bother me. How am I supposed to read while they're doing that? But then I recognize there's an important part. My co-host NJ was telling me, she's like, your kids need to see you read. Like if you want them to read more, you need to read in front of them. And so it's like, wow. So part of me being a mother is actually showing them me doing other things. Yeah. And that's actually teaching them. It's not just me cultivating myself. It's not just me doing the things I love and fulfilling. Like they see that and they want to emulate that. And I remember my dad had his own, auto body shop when I was young, and I would go in and I would be his office manager, like in the summers. And it was some of my favorite memories because I have a really good work ethic. And I think that's because I saw my dad work, and I saw my dad with customers. I walked around and helped my dad do estimates on cars, and, and to see those things helped me understand what work means, like helped me understand what, connecting with clients and people means, helped me understand organization. So our parenting, motherhood is not just about looking at our kids. It's about our kids looking at us.
Yeah. And
it's such an important aspect of motherhood that I think we miss because we see our kids and we get zoned in. And we recognize they see us back. Then all of a sudden it goes, crap. If I've got a spotlight on me, what am I teaching? And how am I showing them how to live? And that's, I think, the essence of motherhood. It's not making sure they get fed, although that's important, making sure their diapers are changed and all that kind of stuff. It's what are they seeing me do? Because that's the long-lasting impressions that we teach them about how they see the world, how they perceive life, how they engage with life, how they create relationships. And that's the stuff where you can make or break kids.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's a big part of what I say is, live the life you want for your kids, because you can't protect them from all the things that they're going to have their own journey and their own things they have to go through in that journey. But if I can show them how a way to show up to it, then that makes all the difference, a way to perceive it differently. And my big thing right now has been, okay, instead of going, oh, it's so hard, I don't want to do it, I'm going, okay, I can figure this out. And that may mean I ask for help, because I can ask for help from a teacher, to teach my child, because that's not my thing, like in terms of math and science and reading and all of that stuff. I remember trying to teach my sister reading and lost my mind. It was not good. But anyway, but how would you recommend people do that? Because it's great to talk about it and to think about it. It's like, yeah, that's a great idea. I love that. But then to live it and, to take it from here into this action space, what would you say to a mom who wants to do that?
Well, I think one, sit down for a moment and imagine if your kids weren't there for a weekend. You just have your whole weekend. We just talked about this on the Boss Mom podcast. We were talking about momcations, and I'd never heard of that term, but apparently it's a term. And it's basically this idea of 48 hours where everybody's gone. You're in your own home, but there's no husband, partner, there's no kids, nothing. What would you do? Like that's the question, is what would you do if you weren't allowed to, if it wasn't about working? Because I think, I have a business, but there's so much in my business that is because I'm passionate about it. Like I didn't just start a business to make money. I started a business because that's something that I really love. And there's tons of other things I love to do. So I, sit down and go, what would you do if there's no kids, you had, a whole weekend? What would you do outside of, sleeping and, and eating? Like, where would you be productive? Like, where would you?
Probably depends on how old the kid is, or if the moms are listening, or like, I would be sleeping. I would sleep the whole time.
I know. You know what though? For me, I feel like I waste time sleeping because I don't remember that. I don't, I want to remember and savor. For me, there's no savoring. So I'd sleep in a little. Yeah. But, when you start to break that down, you go, for me, I was like, oh, I used to be a morning reader. I used to get up in the morning and I would get my cup of coffee and I'd go sit out on a patio or wherever, go outside somewhere, and I'd read. And I really loved morning reading. And I do not do that with kids. You just don't do it. Because for me, I don't want to wake up at 4 a.m. just so I can get morning reading in. And so that was like, I would do that. And then I would do, like we talked about before we got on, I'd sew and I'd, do these crafts, and I'd do, books, image books. And then maybe I would go in and I would write some of my next Boss Mom book and those kinds of things. And so when you sit down and say, if I didn't have kids for 2 whole days and I was in my own home, I wasn't vacationing somewhere, how would you spend your time? And then once you do that, say, well, how can I do those things if my kids are there? Like I may not be able to read in the morning, but I can read in front of my kids. Like they get story time, I get story time. And I have a 1 and 3-year-old. So if you're going, oh, well, Dana, I don't have kids where I can do that with, you can, because now that I've started reading, my kids start reading. Like they have their own time together, which is amazing. For all of us are doing the same thing. And when, sewing, okay, how can I build time into sew so they can see, how can I, if I'm going to want to get more cooking, I love to cook, like how can I incorporate my kids into the cooking? Like, so you just imagine, what would you actually do if you didn't have kids around? And how can you do those things even if your kids are around? And it may be morphing how you do them and that kind of thing, because I think part of it is the important part isn't to how can I get rid of my kids so that I can do these things? Because there are things where it's like, yes, I just want to do that alone. But I think some of it is, how can I incorporate those things so my kids see it? So that my kids see that mom's working right now. She's got to do this thing. Or, mom's reading right now. If you want to, you go read a book too. Or no, mom's, cooking. Let's get you a safe cooking knife and, for kids, and you can chop something too. And figure out, because them seeing that, you'd be amazed at how all of a sudden you're feeling fulfilled. And you're not feeling this feeling like I can only do the things I want when my kids aren't around. Like it's a practice, it's a habit, but you can do those things. You just have to decide what it is you want to do and then commit to making time for those things and incorporating your kids in and figuring out what works for you and testing and tweaking until all of a sudden 6 months down the line, you go, wow, my kids are cooking together and I can make a 30-minute meal and it's fun because that's what I enjoy. Or I hate cooking, so I order it out and someone comes and brings me our food because that gives me time to read more or do this craft with my kids more or whatever that is, And I think you just have to start consciously thinking about those things, because we're so much in survival mode of being parents that we don't like feel like we even get the time to think about what life would be like out of survival mode. So we live there, and living in survival mode, I have been there, is ridiculously stressful. It's overwhelming. You cry a lot more. And I'm all about a good proactive cry. But if you are you're on the verge of your husband comes home and he's like, oh, what did you do today? And you're like, that feeling like nobody's even said anything that would warrant crying, but you get that lump in your throat. And you're in survival mode. And you just, you have to consciously sit down and commit to getting yourself out of it and doing things that you enjoy and showing your kids those things.
I love that you talked about taking steps, that it takes time to get to that space where you're really, that it turns into what you might envision it to be, but just knowing what you want it to be and taking the steps towards that makes a huge difference. I mean, like, when I was breastfeeding, that's one of the things that kept me entertained, was I read a book. Now I was trying to read like a giant Harry Potter book. I had to get the Kindle version because that was not working so well. But but yeah, I mean, now my kid, we went to preschool orientation. I have a 5 and a 2-year-old, and what did he do? He made a beeline. He was overwhelmed. He made a beeline for the books and sat down and was like, I'm just going to sit here with the books until I feel more comfortable to interact with people. And ISO, as we were just talking about as well, I was trying to make them costumes. And my son was like really getting into it. And I thought about, at first I was annoyed. I was like, I can't do this for you if you are here. And then I was like, you know what? I'll show him how to thread the machine. So we actually went through, and now he's like really excited about that he can thread the sewing machine and put the bobbin in and everything. This is the 5-year-old, mind you, not the 2-year-old. But it was cool. Like, he's not to the point of like doing all of that stuff by himself, but it's fun to be able to have him interested in the fact of all the other things that I can do and see the potential. Because that's one of the big things they say is that, you know, you think of yourself as, or you think of your kids as having unlimited potential, and you want to tell them they can do anything and be anything and all that stuff. But how are you living that? You know, because
they see that same thing in you. I mean, it's the same thing like they talk about body image, and, you know, moms will go in front of the mirror and they'll be like, oh, honey, mom needs to lose a little weight, or mom needs to work out today, or no, don't look at mom how she looks now. This is not how she normally looks. You know, and Dove has done those commercials where they're like, stop doing that. Yeah. Because your kid doesn't see any of those things.
Yeah.
Like, your kid doesn't see anything that you see. Like, you've put limitations on yourself. All that your kid sees is the most amazing thing that ever existed. Yeah. And until you tell them differently and ingrain in their brain repetitively that you're not amazing, then they believe that and they know that to be true. So why would you ever do that? Yeah. And it takes a lot of practice to be able to tell yourself, like, I can't say negative things about my body around my kids, because that's not a positive way to do it. And so you all of a sudden start to stop saying negative things about your body as a practice. And it's good, because why? What's the point? Like, either get up and go work out if you want to work out, but don't sit around and say, oh, I should work out. Don't look at mommy. You know what I mean? Like, it's actually an amazing way for you to take action and to help shift the way you talk and the way you self-talk by recognizing that your kids hear you and you can't say those things, or else your kids will start to believe it. And I think that's the downfall of the negative things that we can do as parents, is without even thinking about it, we say things about how we've limited ourselves enough to where our kids start to believe that that's really the way the world works. We have the most beautiful opportunity to tell our kids that everything and anything is possible. But just like you said, if you're not saying that out loud about yourself and you're not showing them that you actually believe it, then they're going to catch on that you're not walking the walk. And that what you're saying really isn't the way the world works. And we want our children to believe that the world really does work that way. And we're the best example is to show them how it is through what we do.
And the best part is, like you were saying about, again, back to the stepping stones, is just starting to shift that self-talk and starting to, you know, doing the work to grow. It actually starts shifting our perception and our reality, and we start expanding, because it is that survival mode is like the blinders, like I will get through this, and you get the adrenaline and cortisol, like hormones rushing all the time, and that actually breaks down your body, like literally breaks down your body. And so being able to start, and makes it really hard to get creative. So even just taking those stepping stones to start saying nice things about yourself, start giving yourself a break, and going, okay, so that didn't work. What do I want to do with it? You start expanding the possibilities. So I would love to hear you talk about how you get past, like you talked about the guilt stuff. But like, what are some tips and things that will help moms start shifting that conversation within themselves and taking the action? Because I know so many moms who have a passion, but they kind of put that aside and say, like, well, maybe later, maybe I can't do that now.
Yeah. So it's there's two examples that come to mind. that I think can be really helpful. So one is I'm a big fan of The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod.
Mhm.
I'm friends with him. I go to his event every year and everything. And I actually just interviewed the woman who co-wrote, Lindsay, who co-wrote the new book that's coming out. That's The Miracle Morning for Parents and Families. So totally, I think it's coming out in mid-September, like right when this is like the week before this comes out.
Nice.
I totally recommend getting it because it's about what he calls savers, and then they translated it to help with your kids to do it too, which is called charms. But it's basically, to me, yes, it's a ritual in the morning, but I do mine at night sometimes or whatever. But for me, the tip is repetition, first of all, is everybody's friend. Like, we sit there and we go, I've got to tell my kid to trace a million times. And we sing Itsy Bitsy Spider a million times until I hear it in my sleep. And we do all of these things. We brush our teeth and we create habits for our kids. We don't do that anymore. Like, we used to do that in school, and then we'll read a blog once or watch a webinar once or do a thing once and then go, oh, why didn't it stick? Why is that not a habit? Like, repetition for parents is just as important for repetition for kids. There's a reason why we repeat things, and it's because we start to believe them, we start to internalize it, and once you've internalized it, you can tweak it to actually work for you. It becomes from information into actual knowledge, usable knowledge, to work, to figure out how you're going to use it in your life. So the first thing is you got to recognize that whatever you're going to want to change, whatever you're going to want to do, if you want to get out of survival mode, you have to repeat. And one of the things I love is, affirmations can be a really great thing. And not because, if you sit there and wake up and say, I want money to come my way, and then you're like, why isn't money coming my way? I want to be not stressed out. What it is it's the thing inside your brain that you're actually verbally manifesting that reminds you that you give a crap about what it is you're talking about, right? It reminds you of your priorities, and it starts to shift, just like repeating for your kids and your kids seeing that the world is a certain place of possibility. Your brain starts to shift. So you've got to repeat, and you've got to commit to repeating every morning, what on earth, or whatever you're doing it to the day, what on earth you care about. Like, if you're in survival mode and you're like, I'm living a 24 hours at a time and I want to not live 24 hours at a time, then you have to wake up every morning. And I actually have made, like, I was just telling this to a client. I was like, literally record your 2-second, or 2-sentence affirmation of what you want your life to be like on your phone, and make it the song that goes off when your alarm goes off in the morning. So the first thing you hear is, I live 24 hours at a time, and I don't want to live that way anymore. I want to, realize what my priorities are and care about it. And every day I'm going to dedicate 10 minutes of my time to figure out what I care about, what I want to do. And so you wake up and you start to realize, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to dedicate 10 minutes of my time, and you give yourself permission, space, you've put it out into the universe to say it's something you want. So you've set priority for yourself about what on earth it is you want. And then the repetition and committing to say, I'm going to do that. Like, I am right in the middle right now of saying, I'm sick of being in survival mode in my kitchen. I just interviewed Samantha Rogers of eatcleancookdirty.com, and that we talked about that. I was like, I understand I have to make a commitment. I have to make a commitment that if I want to prep my food, that I'm going to have to find the time and make it a priority to use her tools to prep my food. And so I don't live 24 hours of time in my kitchen. I can live a week in advance and feel like I'm in control in that space. And that's what getting out of survival mode is. It's feeling like you're in control. So you have to commit to it. You have to repeat it. You have to tell the world out loud, even if it's nobody's in the room, what on earth you want. Otherwise, you're going to say, I'm in survival mode and I'm just doing what I'm doing, and wondering why you're never out of it. And it's because you've never decided to yourself what you want to do to get out of it, and what steps you're going to take. And that's got to be the first thing. Otherwise, whatever you're trying to attain is going to seem overwhelming, because you don't know where you're going. Like, if that old saying that, like, if you don't know where you're going, every path leads there.
Yeah.
And every path is really scary because you have no idea what's it. So you've got to make the decision, repeat it, affirm it, say it out loud, do it every day, commit to the time, whether it's 5 minutes a day or more, and just go for it.
Yeah. I love that. Absolutely. I mean, it's really, giving yourself the space and really reaffirming that you're gonna do something is huge. That, you know, you get yourself passionate. I was actually, one of the songs I like to listen to first thing in the morning is as of recently, because it's a fairly recent song, but and I'm gonna forget who wrote it, but this is gonna be the best day of my life, or it's the best day of my life. It's American. Yeah, I'll have to look it up. I don't remember the name of them, but one of the lines in that is no limits, just epiphanies. And I was like, I love that. You know, because when you release the limits and say, I can do this, and somehow I'll figure out how that this is what I want and I'm going to make it happen. That is, every obstacle is an opportunity to have an epiphany about something new and where you're going.
Yeah. Well, and you can't start breaking things down to understand what steps you have to take until you decide what the goal is.
Right.
And then once you decide the goal, you can go, okay, well, obviously, you know, I want to lose this weight, or I want to get back into reading, or I want to, you know, spend this time doing this, or get back into cooking because I loved that before I had kids, or whatever that is. You make that decision and then you go, okay, well, I can't just get up in the morning and say, I'm going to do this. And like the affirmation is only the first step. Like the second step is, okay, how do I break that down so it's actually actionable? So I actually,
instead of going, oh, that's so far away, I just can't.
Yeah. Like I joke, like, because it's the same thing in business. You do the same exact thing in business. What do you want to attain? What do you want to do? What do you want to create? Okay, now let's break it down after you've decided where you want to go to say, how would we get there? And that's a lot of times where you go out and you get help for somebody to tell you how you get there and break down the steps for you and everything. But you got to make that decision. And I call it a purposeful checklist, because this is what we do. We come in and I've seen people and I'm like, well, what's on your checklist? And they're like, well, write a book and, you know, and start a movement, build a business, you know, teach my kids to potty train. I'm like, okay, all of those are actual projects. Like those are not a checklist. You've created a project list. Two completely different things. Writing a book is like, if you just sat down and said, I'm going to write my book today. Like, what the hell does that mean? Right? You know what I mean? Like that's like a million. If you say, I'm going to write 500 words today, or I'm going to just brainstorm chapter titles, or I'm going to, like, those are checklists. Those are things you can do every day. So when you make the affirmation, you say, this is what I want to attain. And then you got to break it down until you can actually act on it in that time. If you say, I'm going to dedicate 10 minutes a day, and my checklist says I need to write 2,000 words of a book. Well, nobody can write 2,000 words of a book in 10 minutes. I don't even think people could type that fast. So that's not really, that doesn't make sense. Like your goal and the time you've given it to commit to don't align. So in order to make it a purposeful checklist of what you got to do every day, you have to break it down until the commitment you've made, the time you have, and what you have to do actually work. Otherwise, you're just going to get deflated again because you're like, oh, I'm not getting there. It must be me. You're going to question yourself. You're going to feel guilty. You're going to, you know, give up. And it's not because you're not capable. It's just because you didn't prepare correctly. You didn't break it down enough so that all of those three things aligned. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, and then they give up, and then they get overwhelmed, and they get this, you know, the same sort of mode that they were in, that survival mode. And I think it's all about, like, every mom should just get project planning training. That's every project management training, because I'm telling you, if you learn how to break things down appropriately, all of a sudden things would seem much more tackleable, if that was a word.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can look at, like, business. And I know, like, in my training, and possibly in yours too, we talked about SMART plans. And, you know, there's get specific. Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Is it realistic? And is it time oriented? And then I take it further of, like, AIM, which is we'll use, like, ideal, and then minimum, and then what's in the middle is what's the A? The A.
I hate it when I forget my own acronyms. I'm telling you.
There's so many acronyms. I remember when my dad first introduced me to acronyms. It was SOCME was the only one that came to mind. I have no idea what that meant. But there's just that achievable, like, is what's in the middle. you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, looking at that sort of thing just to kind of break down. So that's like really, really short, like, here, go do that. But yeah, absolutely. So I could talk to you forever, but we're at the end of our time. So just to recap, what are the just like 2-3 things you would really love the audience to take away from this interview?
Yeah, sure. I think one is, in order to create any kind of change that you want to create, you know, to actually do more than just do the parenting, is you have to consciously sit down and decide what you want first, and then commit to some time to cultivate that and repeat it over and over and over again to create the same kind of habits you want to create in your kids. I think number 2 is that you have to recognize that you see motherhood as looking at your children and what you're doing for them, but you have to also see that your children are looking at you, and how are you representing that in more ways than just being a parent, because you want your kids to be more than just one thing. And then to seek what you love, what you really enjoy. If your kids weren't around, do that exercise. If your kids weren't around for a weekend, what would you do? And then how can you do those things and incorporate your kids in them as well? Use both of those tactics to figure out not just your hobbies and what you love, but the same thing for business. It works the same exact way. And we didn't get to get into like how you actually run a business, but a lot of times that's what I find is women want to create some financial freedom for themselves, and they want to do those kinds of things that are maybe business oriented. And that's the same start. That's the same exact way you start. You start a business by deciding what you want, how you're going to get there. And that helps you understand what support and tools you need to actually help you achieve what you've now committed to do and repeat. And what goals to get to.
And that is something that you are awesome and help people with, the business building and creation and concepts. So I believe you have a awesome free gift to share with the audience so that they can get a taste of what you do. So why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah. So, basically, I'm giving you guys the first 2 whole sections of my book, which is all about the mindset part. And so it's a downloadable, and it's, I think it's the first step, because when we talk about limitations, that first section of the book, like the rest of the book, addresses how you actually build a business from like the concept or the trying to the expecting. We use it in like birthing terms. Yeah. But the first part's all about getting past that guilt, understanding what we can offer the world, and deciding on what those things are. So there's that. And then in addition to that, there are some actual downloadable resources that go with that part of the book that are exercises you can actually do to start to hash out what your priorities are and what you want to achieve and where you want to spend your time. So I think both of those things will be really helpful to just even see where those limitations are, to address where those are in your life. Because I think that's the first step. It's like you got to realize there's a problem before you can fix it. Like we can say, where am I getting past my limitations? But if you're not really consciously, honestly accepting and understanding where you see limitations, we can't get past them. So I think some of those exercises in that first part of the book will help.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dana. It's been a pleasure having you here. And thank you everyone for watching this very first interview for Motherhood Unlimited. And as a reminder to everyone, the email you were sent with this video also has a link for you to access the free gift. It's right there. So that concludes this interview of Motherhood Unlimited. And thank you everyone so much for joining us, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye. Bye.